All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine soul of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, as we teased last time, we I did my homework and I finished Iron Claw, and we're going to talk about the same theme, toxic, both masculinity and femininity from that show. And we'll go ahead and introduce it. There might be some spoilers in there, but
Hmm.
anybody who knows the history of the Von Erichs, I mean, you knew a lot of the things that were coming. You just wanted to see how they did it dramatically.
Yeah.
Uh, so personally, Carrie Von Erich, the Texas Tornado, was one of my favorites when I was a youngin. And you talked about rewatching that SummerSlam where he got the
Hmm.
Intercontinental title. I remember that vividly from when I was that age because I was still that impressionable kid that didn't think it was real but loved it.
Right. And I was trying to remember as I was watching the movie, okay, which one of them becomes the Texas Tornado? Because I only ever knew him as the Texas Tornado, and I was like, which one of them is the? Because I kind of I remembered the basic story, but I couldn't remember which brother was which and who did what.
Well, I knew it was
Um,
Carrie Von Erich. That's why the twist threw me off because I was like, wait a minute, I was damn sure it was Carrie, but then this thing happened where he can't wrestle anymore.
yeah. So let's
This
back
is
up a
yeah,
second.
yeah, back up and because we got to do
Th-
spoilers for that section.
So actually, let me back up even farther with a bit of a prologue of an honorable mention that I don't think we have time for. But I'd messaged to you that it was a phenomenal portrayal of masculinity and also worth the hype. Because I mentioned when we teased this is I could probably count on one hand the number of movies I've seen over the last few years that have, and I got to think about it. I was like, okay, so I thought Top Gun Maverick lived up to the hype. Godzilla minus one lived up to the hype. And I was trying to think of others of movies that people said, man, you got to see this. This is really good. And then I watched and I was like, oh man, yeah, that is really good. And Ford versus Ferrari, Critical Drinker really loved it. And it's on Netflix right now in the US at least. And I watched it, and I even got a little misty eyed at the end, and I knew what was coming because I knew that story better than I knew the Von Erich story because I'd seen it more recently. Um, but it's about Carroll Shelby, who is a race car driver until he, this is why you'll love this story, was found to have a heart condition. And he took nitroglycerin pills through his life to manage his heart condition. And so, for anyone who knows the Shelby Cobra, which was him up tuning the Ford Mustang, and that's where that came from. And there's this phenomenal museum at their workshop in Vegas that we went to when my wife and I went to Vegas a few years ago. It was just after the movie had come out. But the part I wanted to talk about of what made me text you that is because as I've talked about the last few weeks, different manifestations of masculinity. And this isn't a spoiler because you've seen it. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen this scene. And they set it up both in the trailer and in the movie of Carroll Shelby takes this guy out in the GT40, which is just one of this incredible supercar that they're building for Le Mans. And he takes him on such a wild ride that the Ford the third, the grandson of Henry Ford, the founder, breaks down and starts crying, like ugly crying, and and they make you think that, oh, this guy's just a faux tough guy, because he has everyone has to do what he says because he's Mr. Ford and he's the first words out of his mouth after he starts crying. He's not crying because he was freaked out. He's not crying because Shelby scared him by driving so crazy, right on the edge with this car. The first words out of his mouth were, "I wish my dad was alive to see this," because he was that moved that he had helped, that his company, the company his grandfather built and his father helped build up even bigger and is now in his hands. And the first words out of this man's mouth, he is moved to tears because of that family legacy and how much he values it. And ultimately, if you know the story, that's why he created a racing division, is because Enzo Ferrari insulted him. And he didn't just insult him, he insulted his family because that's the family name. That's why he did this. And to me, that's just one of a number of Damon's character and Christian Bale's great and everything. Their portrayals of masculinity, all different, all valuable, all uplifting. And then I saw after I'd finished with that, I was like, the Iron Claw's on Netflix now too. Heard a lot of good things about this. Let me start it. I started it, I got into it, and it was right before bed. And I thought, I know how this story ends. I don't think I want to be watching this right before bed. Let me finish watching this later.
Well, I didn't sleep
Um,
well that night, so maybe I should have taken your
yeah. So
your
I finished
approach, but I
watching
just
it.
don't have any time to watch a movie except right before bed.
I found a weekend afternoon where I could finish watching it.
Nope, no, I want to interject there because this is my place in this whole
Mhm,
discussion. I should have had Dawkins up because
mm,
this is another example of that duality that I keep talking about. And for those that don't know Dawkins' work, the selfish gene, we're driven to pass our genes. That's the whole point of it. Even the mindless virus is driven to pass its genes on to the next generation. And that same drive bleeds over into things like generational wealth, but also into ideas, the meme of pride in your surname, pride in your family, because that same drive overlaps these things. One might be a spandrel of the other, but it's just all of these things go together into that desire to pass your genes on. That's why we should be, as human beings in the Western world, focused on generational wealth, not just your wealth in the moment. That's why you don't YOLO, right? That's why the message is kind
mhm.
of kind of skewed. Oh, you only live once. Might as well spend it on yourself and have fun. You only live once. Hey, you're only young so often. Don't have kids. Live your best life and then think about that stuff later. Oh my gosh, I need IBF because I waited too long. Right? That's the modern message is in the that's why we're so cognitively dissonant right now because that's why we're so depressed right now. Who's most susceptible to these messages? White, privileged women. Who's the most miserable population? And I'm gonna I this is reinforced by the data. Who is the most miserable population in the Western world? White middle class women. They take
Mhm.
over half of all the antidepressants. That's over half compared to all other demographics combined. Not more than any one of them, more than all of the others combined. And they're the most susceptible to that message. They're the ones that are doing that, and then they get to a point in their life and they're just miserable because they've been fighting their nature for so long. Now we're not lizard brain. We have a prefrontal cortex. We can make decisions for ourselves even despite our urges. But if you go against your nature too long, you're gonna be struggling mentally. And so back to your point, we are driven to pass our genes along to future generations. And that's not just a baby making machine. That's a grandparent making machine. That's a set up your family for life. The Rockefellers, yeah, they've done a lot of crappy shit, but who can blame them from a motivation standpoint?
Well,
Now, how
this
you go
is
about it is where our prefrontal
yeah,
cortex comes in. But
and this is why I said that the reason I wanted to talk about this is because the Iron Claw is such a great, based on a true story, but fictionalized and dramatic portrayal of both
I don't know how
positive
you can be
and
more
toxic
dramatic than the end
masculinity.
result of that
I
that
I
family,
know
though.
exactly. But okay, so
They might
so
they might have softened it.
um um Fritz von Erich, the dad, played by a great character actor Holt Mikkel. I
Oh
don't know how
yeah,
to
I
pronounce
can't
his
wait
name
till
because
they
I never
bring
heard of
back
him.
Manhunter because he's great in that too.
And he's one of those guys where he's oh yeah, that guy that's in that thing. Even if you don't know his name, you know the face, and he plays the dad great. And
He's the old man
just
Kevin Bacon.
yeah, it's just that character is positive and toxic masculinity rolled into one because it shows you where masculinity, where and how it can become toxic. Because we start out, I loved the start of the movie of in black and white.
Okay,
because it's
from here
him.
on out, spoiler alerts,
Yeah,
because we're just going to talk about it openly. If you haven't seen it, then watch it first, then finish this episode. If you don't care to see it and you just want to hear about the topics, then keep going.
yeah. I highly recommend it, especially if you like, you know, this kind of dramatic movie.
And you
And
don't even have to like wrestling to love this movie.
one of the things about it, just from a technical point of view, that's I think so lacking and so hard to do, is they get the pacing right. They mix in the dramatic moments with the more uplifting moments with the wrestling to give you a little bit of action to break up the tension. And I never felt like any one scene dragged on too long, which is one of my big critiques of movies nowadays is I got that 10-second skip button and I'm like, okay, come on, get to the point. Yeah, get to the point. And I didn't use that watching either of these movies. But it starts out with Fritz von Erich busting his butt in the wrestling circuit, which isn't the multi-billion-dollar business that WWE is now.
Mhm.
We're in the regional days. You know, you're maybe making a few $100 a night if you're a headliner.
A
All right.
good documentary is called Wrestlers, and
Yeah.
it's about a smaller outfit that's trying to make it big. So that's a good documentary.
Um, and that's what everything was now. And now there's some of that out there still. But why is he doing that? Because he's got two kids. His wife is holding the hands of two boys, and she's very pregnant. And they're living out of an RV. And he's no, I need to push hard. I need to push even harder than I've been pushing because if I've got to make it to the top in order to make enough money to buy a home for my family. It's like, yes, that's what a man does. That is what drives a man of provide and protect. You know, as you've beaten that dead horse repeatedly over the past few weeks as we've been talking about this. But then you fast forward, and what's he's doing? He's raised his sons into what is now the family business. And now he's no longer a wrestler, but he is the owner and the promoter of this regional that because everything was regional for those of you who don't know the story of how the WWF WWE came to be is everything used to be regional. And so he basically runs the
Under a
biggest
governing body. So
yeah.
that's important for the story. Yeah.
So he basically runs the and where he's made his money is he basically runs the Texas circuit. Texas was big enough it had its own circuit basically. And he is the head promoter and owner of this, okay? And his boys are now the lead attractions or they are becoming the lead attractions. Um okay, nothing wrong with that. Zac Efron plays Kevin who is just as we meet him being given this shot at the title for this promotion. The problem is the way he does it. It's not I don't know if you can think of a way to explain this better of what makes what turns Fritz's natural inclinations and desires of provide and protect into being toxic is is well, for one, he pits his boys against each other.
Hmm.
Now, in a certain circumstance, you can understand that because, hey, we are family, but this is a business. And whichever one of you gets the most pop from the crowd is the one I'm going to promote because that's how the business works. That's understandable. Competition can be healthy, but it can also be very bad. This is how rivalries come about. This is where, where you get the USA versus Canada in the hockey tournament last year, where as soon as the whistle blew, they threw down their gloves and they just started going at it. Okay, because they didn't like each other.
Hmm.
Okay, that's fun when it's USA versus Canada. That's not good when it's your own sons against each other.
I would
So,
say it actually solved for a problem because he's the owner of this organization and his son is the one being given the shot. There's always going to be the people that say, well, that's because it's your son.
mm-hmm,
Well, it
mm-hmm.
semi solves for that problem if the sons are fighting each other.
Yeah.
because now you can't say they got it because they were his son. They got it because they were fighting each other. So from an outside perspective, it solves for that problem. But at the same time, you're right. Well, I mean, with even with dogs, I'm learning this as I'm fostering some right now. They won't let you adopt from the same litter if you're in the same household because they have what's called litter mate syndrome, where
Mm,
they will detach from their owner and have such a rivalry with each other that it gets violent. It ceases to be just play at some point. And I mean that we had a very good example of that in humans in what happened there. Now, with the dad, like you said, where it becomes toxic, his heart was in the right place because he wanted the best for his sons. But I'll give an exercise example since that's our lane, right? It's that idea of some is good, more is not better.
mm.
Some being hard on your children, some making them be disciplined, some pushing them to their limits is good, but there has to be a countervailing force. And what happened in that family a lot, and even with the mother, there was no countervailing force.
I was about to bring her up is because I said this is a great example of also toxic and positive femininity of she is a great mother most of the time. But there's this great scene where um where Zac Efron Kevin goes into Maura Tierney. She's another one of those you'll recognize the face, and she's Doris, the mother, and she is starting from that beginning scene of she's a great example of the great wisdom found in country songs, and one of the classics is "Stand by Your Man,"
Hmm.
and that's what she's doing because you got two kids, you got another one on the way. We're living out of an RV, but I'm here,
Hmm.
okay, and I'm all right. If you think this is the way forward, if you think this is the best way to provide for our family, all right, I'm with you. And he does it. But then there's this great scene where Kevin comes in and says, "Mom, Dad is pushing," and I think it's Mike, the youngest son. I
Hmm.
I, I think that's the one he says. He's pushing him too hard because Kevin can kind of tell Mike doesn't want this life.
Hmm.
He's more interested in other stuff. He doesn't really want to be an in-ring performer. He's more interested in the technical side of it. He's more interested in the
The
in,
production and stuff. He
in the
was
production
there's a
side.
scene where he gets knocked down for talking about the cameras. It's like, who cares about the cameras? Did you see the
Exactly.
wrestling? Yeah.
And it should have been, oh, you know what? Here's something that I don't know that my son does, and yeah, this is no longer just a live sport. This is now becoming a televised sport, and there's big money to be made there. But
Hmm.
Fritz, the dad, is so narrowly focused, and he's so narrowly focused on, and you find out later part of the reason why is because he felt like he got screwed over by the industry.
Hmm.
And he did. There was a lot of that. You listen to interviews of old wrestlers. There was a lot of screwing over and backstabbing and and promises and handshakes that then were never fulfilled.
Well, it's a trope, it's a stereotype with a lot of truth behind it. And I know this as someone who works with athletes. The dad that pushes their kid too hard in their sport
Hmm.
is usually the one that says, "Oh, if I didn't hurt my shoulder, I would have played major league ball," or it's the Al Bundy. Where remember when I threw 4 touchdowns and I had 4 touchdowns for Polkai, uh, and he was always disappointed in his son because he had no interest in sports, right?
Hmm.
So it's that dad that I always have to deal with and be like, look, they're working out 3 times at school. They have practice every day after school. I don't need to train them 4 times a week.
Hmm.
And oh no, they need to work harder. They need to work hard. No, no, no. We need to work smarter. In fact, maybe I see them once a week and we do rehab. Okay. That's it.
Oh, one of that just reminds me. One of the most frustrating clients I had when I was working at the box gym was I don't remember if he was a middle schooler or a high schooler. And I was asking, okay, so what are you doing in school? Well, we don't know because coach tells us when we go in there that day. And I'm like, well, you don't have like a set program of you're working this right now. And you're like, no, it just changes day to day. I'm like, great. Just tell me what you did the previous couple of days when you see me and I'll figure it out on the spot. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but
Oh,
the first time
I
I've ever.
constantly have to do that. Yeah.
I've never
That's
wanted
my
to punch
biggest
a
strength
strength
as a
and
coach
conditioning
is
coach so bad.
I'm
Yeah,
adaptable in every situation. So,
but
but no, back to that dad was the dad in the
it,
show. No,
exactly.
you did poorly, not because maybe you needed a day of rest, not because maybe we need to work on
Hmm.
some technical stuff. It was you didn't work hard enough.
And also, back to the youngest son is the most glaring example of he's not you, Dad. Okay,
Hmm.
it's um Kevin is the one who is the most like his dad in physicality, in technical ability. He doesn't have the persona that you need to do the promos, to do that side of the wrestling, but he's also the most desirous of, hey, I'm the older brother. This is my responsibility. This is my job. I need to do this. And so he'll push himself, to the breaking point, and he's kind of happy to do that. But he recognizes, and this is the scene I was getting at, and he goes and he tells mom he's pushing Mike too hard. Mike can't handle this. He's pushing him too hard. He's gonna hurt him, and ultimately he does end up getting hurt, mentally and physically. And mom says your father knows what he's doing. Now, that in and of itself isn't a problem because as we've talked about before and quasi disagreed on is if my wife does something with the kid involving the kids and I'm like, I don't think we should do it that way, or I don't like what you told them, or I'm not going to disagree in front of the kids. But do we ever have a scene? Is there ever a moment when it's just mom and dad of, honey, Mike's not you. Mike's not his brother. Maybe you should find another way for him to be part of the family business, right? Or maybe you should let him go live his own life, whichever. Um, in fact, one of this is a good example of how narrowly focused he is we find out later that he was actually an incredible musician.
And the clarinet of all things, which
Yeah,
is not considered a very manly
yeah.
instrument.
But his mom says that's how he wooed her, is he would play for her, and that he was wonderful at it. And that's where she says that's where Mike gets his musical talent from. And they don't know this, but Mike is in a garage band. And where is the moment of why can't he do this thing that you gave up? You gave up on music to pursue athletics. Why can't Mike do it the other way around?
Hmm.
You know, is where was that moment from the mom? And we never get that from the mom. And that's where that is where the natural femininity of stand by your man becomes toxic because it's, well, whatever he does is right. No,
Hmm.
no. And so, you don't necessarily want to in public or in front of the kids, depending on the situation. But when it's just the two of you, he needs that. It's not just that you need to do that because it's the right thing to do. He needs that because as we've talked about ad nauseum, shocker, men and women think differently. He may go, it never even dawned on me. I never even thought of it that way. As I've said, my wife is my sounding board for a lot of these kinds of things because, I'll throw it out there and she'll go, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what the point you're trying to make. But I think if you said it this way, it would be more convincing. It would, you know, be more understandable. And I'm like, thank you. Okay. So because she thinks differently than I do. So he needs that. And she never gives it to
Hmm.
the detriment of the family. Um, Contrast that with Pam, who uh, it becomes Kevin's wife.
Hmm.
And this is, and maybe you can speak to this both personally and technically, that the the other way this movie hit me was when the story of the Von Erich family becomes more the story of Kevin and Pam, and the way it shows rather than tells is another great thing the movie does, generational trauma, because Kevin is trying desperately to not be his father to his own son. So much so, and I think this is the indication of, don't worry, you're not going to be,
Hmm.
even if you don't know it yet, even if you don't know how. When his son is born and they go to get his birth certificate, and he says, "No, this is wrong," and rather than Von Erich, he gives them his original last name, because Fritz had taken on the name Von Erich, which was, I believe, his mother or his grandmother's name, family name, because he thought it sounded cooler. He thought it sounded better for the
Okay, so I think
stage.
you missed a little something in there though,
Yeah,
because the gravestones had the mother's maiden name, or the excuse me, the other name on there.
yeah.
Because I think Von Erich was the stage name that he took on. So he still
Mm,
went by the other last name. He was just
okay,
known as. And
okay,
I think Kevin explains that in the beginning, but it's like really quick
okay.
when he's
Yeah,
talking to
I missed that.
Pam. Yeah,
That must have
in the
been when they were
diner.
on
Yeah.
their date,
Yeah,
talking
I
about
think
his
when he was
family
doing a
history.
stage name, he took his mother's maiden name.
But whether that event actually happened or they just dramatized that to make the point was, I'm not going to be my father with my own son,
Hmm.
because I respect my dad. I'm happy he gave us the life he did, but I'm not going to do that with my own son. They're going to they're going to live their own lives. And it was a very symbolic gesture at first, but I think it was indicative of where his mindset was, so that he didn't perpetuate the cycle.
Hmm.
Because it's not the same kind of abuse that, I mean, it was abusive, it was hard and harsh the way Fritz treated his boys, but I don't know that we would go, I mean, it was borderline abuse. Um, but we see with straight up physical and other kinds of abuse on children. I heard Jordan Peterson talking about this at one point, and I can't remember what he said about how the cycle is broken, but he said, obviously, not everyone who is abused becomes an abuser, or after a few generations, everyone would be an abuser, right? Because there's just that many. And that is what makes the positive masculinity of, look, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to do it better.
Hmm.
And that becomes the story arc from that point on to the end of the movie, is how is Kevin going to step into his father's shoes without becoming his father?
Hmm. Yeah, and well, and let's look at what's different between Kevin and the other three brothers. He is, first of all, he had that older brother syndrome,
Mm,
even though he had an older brother who died when they were kids. Uh, but he, as Pam called him out on it in the diner, she said, "You have the older brother syndrome." So he had that protective nature to him for his
yeah.
family. So he had meaning. That gives meaning, right? So we have meaning already set from the beginning as the older brother. And then as the tragedies are starting to pile up, he has Pam. Carrie didn't have anybody. David didn't have anybody. Mike didn't have any. Mike was kind of too young. Mike didn't have anybody uh, in their lives to kind of be that counterbalancing force. Now, had Pam been more like his mother, maybe things would have been different. Or had he never had her as part of the story, when things had been different because that was her role in the dramatized version was kind of that covalent force that I was talking about that they didn't get from their parents. And he was awkward with it at first. He didn't know what to do with it. He was like the
Yeah.
monkey in the keyboard going, eh.
Well, okay, so you said more like if Pam had been, too traditional, too much like Doris, it might not have worked out.
Hmm.
And the first thing that popped into my head is where I was going with Pam in a little bit, which was, or if she'd been too modern, because she could have been from the
Hmm.
time period she came from. She grew up in the rise of the sexual revolution and the rise of the whichever wave of feminism it would have been in the 70s. She could have
That was
been,
80s, early
well,
80s.
I think they met in 79
Oh, okay. But
and then they got
the
married
bulk of
early
the story
80s.
goes through the 80s because
Yeah,
88 was the championship that he basically lost it and got disqualified.
yeah, yeah. So and that, yeah, and then that was the point where he finally, that was his breaking point of, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going home. I'm going home to my wife and my kid because that's what matters. But she could have been, and there wouldn't have been very many people who would have faulted her for saying, I'm out of here. All right, I gave it my best shot. I stuck with you. You won't even come home. And he is literally sleeping on the floor of his dad's office rather than going home. Because, I mean, I want you to watch the movie and I won't go into the details, but basically I interpreted it as what I said of he knows he doesn't want to be his father and he doesn't know how, so he's too scared to even go home because he doesn't want to pass that generational trauma onto his own son. So Pam could have said, I tried. I've been there for you. I've been waiting for you. I tried. I'm done. And she
Hmm.
never did. So he always had that support, and then he had that place to go back to. He had that home to return to once he finally worked through, that's where I need to be and this is how I need to do it.
Hmm.
And and that was the big that was the big difference to me as well, is not just that he had Pam, but who she was and what their relationship was, how their relationship was. You know, all the wisdom in the world in country songs. One of my favorites, Travis Tritt's "Love of a Woman." My baby knows me better than I do. Ain't it funny how a woman has that over a man? Is the opening line of the song, because we are very direct. We very frequently get tunnel vision. We very frequently get focused on, okay, what's the thing that's got to be done? Got it. All right, what's the next thing that's got to be done? And then we need that person to say, hold on a second. Look, forest for the trees and all that. See the big picture. And because he had that, he was not only able to save himself, but then the epilogue at the end of the movie shows the real life pictures of his family now. That he is now the patriarch of this clan, because they ended up having four kids, and they at the time of the movie had something like 14 grandkids. Okay, and so the last shot is this real life picture of the whole family together. That doesn't happen if they don't have that bond that strengthens both of them. The perfect example of what the visual example I gave of the Gable grip,
Hmm.
of reinforcing and being stronger than the sum of their parts. Perfect analogy for a wrestling movie.
Kind of want to go a different direction, so I'm going to let you complete your thought on this because I want to go into the family curse part of it.
Hmm.
Because when I hear things like family curse, I immediately go into heritability of mental illness.
Well, let's stick on that because I want to wrap up with some thoughts on some bigger thoughts on Pam and why. that part of the story is so important because again, the reason we're talking about this stuff is because stories convey these messages so much better than a PowerPoint lecture.
Hmm.
It's going to make it real and it's going to stick with you.
Now,
And there's a biggie. I mean, there's a reason you put up the books you did, and we were talking about before we recorded of mental illness. You know, when it comes to Carrie Von Erich.
hmm yeah, and I put up Determined by Sapolsky because that's the We Don't Have Any Free Will uh, discussion book, which I actually heard a good discussion on that topic where it was, yeah, but we should just act like we do, even if we can't answer that debate, because if you
Hmm.
don't, then you're going to get the worst possible result. But and then Sapolsky's Behave, which is a little bit more comprehensive behavioral biology book. But Dr. Catherine Harden is a behavioral geneticist that studies kind of cluster B types, but more on psychopathy and on that range. And she talks about twin studies and these personality traits that we consider very negative for pro-social behavior tend to be about 50% heritable. That's pretty big. Uh, and I just looked it up real quick. Carrie in this is where there might be a lot of spoilers. Carrie in the movie, they did a pretty good job of portraying what looked like bipolar disorder, like true bipolar disorder, not just, oh, I have multiple personalities or I'm this or that. No, no, he spent most of the show in a deep depression, but then he would go manic.
Hmm.
And he would have these moments where he was a complete adrenaline junkie or he was all in on everything. And you even start in the beginning when you meet him because I didn't know this till the movie. He was an Olympic level discus thrower, and that was the year they canceled the Olympics because of it was going to the what is it, Moscow?
Moscow, yeah,
Yeah,
it
it was
was
going to Moscow during
right
the
after they
Soviet Union.
invaded
Yeah.
the Afghanistan, and President Carter said we won't be attending, and yeah,
Yeah,
the whole
so
thing.
but even then, him sitting in the grass looking around at everybody was a very depressive scene. It wasn't like, oh, look, butterflies and beautiful things. He was like just scanning everything like, huh. And then he has his moments where something good will happen and he'll just go crazy manic. And and he was coping with the depressive parts of it by snorting a lot of coke
Hmm.
to get himself up and get himself motivated. So so I looked at that's why I checked out bipolar disorder heritability. It is one of the most heritable heritable psychiatric conditions at somewhere between 60 and 90%.
Wow.
That's a big range. So a lot of times you can just say it's somewhere in the middle. But somewhere between 60 and 90% heritable. There's not a lot of wiggle room for environmental factors after that, right? And so when I'm looking at a whole family that has the curse, and we have one example that might be this disorder that's highly heritable, you can kind of say, you know what, maybe there was a little bit in all of them. And maybe Kevin was on the low end, and then he had good environmental factors like Pam come into his life. And he did have depressive moments. That's why he was laying on the floor.
Yeah.
And then he had a manic moment. Remember when he was training like a freaking beast right before he had his break, his psychotic break in the ring. So he may have been on that spectrum, but he had a positive influence to keep him level headed. And Carrie, again, it was to me, it was a very good portrayal of it. So that's where I would go with it. And then we look at the other brothers. David was coping a lot too, snorting a lot of coke, doing a lot of drugs. He was doing all kinds of drugs. He was. They showed
He
him taking pills, and
he
that's what
was
ultimately killed
injecting,
him.
so I assumed also steroids.
Yeah, well, because his
And
dad was talking about how skinny he was. Remember
yep, yep.
in the very beginning, you need to hit some weights or you're not going to look like a wrestler.
And you take, you know, whatever probably anabolic steroid he's taking, plus the drugs he's taking, plus then
Plus
the
the
booze,
copious amounts of alcohol. Yeah.
plus the copious amounts of alcohol, then to come down from all those uppers.
Hmm.
And then you add on top of that the incredibly stressful exertion of the training and the performance in the ring. Oh, and all the traveling those guys had to do, right? Is that's gonna take a heck of a toll on your body.
Yeah. And what one of the misconceptions about bipolar is that people think you just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. No, it's long bouts of depression with periods of mania. And these people were using drugs to get themselves up from that depression, and then they hit the manic spot and they just go way overboard. And
Hmm.
so that's what happened with Carrie. He remember the discussion at the table before he has his accident. Again, spoilers. He was talking to Kevin saying, I cannot come down from this.
Yeah,
That those were his words. I cannot come down from this. I'm going to go for a ride.
yeah.
After he'd been drinking a lot and doing
Well,
drugs.
and as you brought up before we started recording, a contributing factor to that mentality was he comes in having just won the second biggest title in the WWF, and the first words out of his dad's mouth are, "When are you going to get a shot at the heavyweight belt, the big title?" It's like, dude, he just did something huge here, and he wasn't even with the company that long when he got that shot. So this is a big effing deal, and it's not, you know, let's take a moment, let's take a moment, and we'll worry about what's next later. No, it was right off the bat when he gonna get a shot at the big belt.
Hmm.
That's not going to help, man.
And also, what we see, I brought this up in a previous episode. The how are we supposed to word this anymore? You're not supposed to say successful. Uh, Died by suicide. The rate of died by suicide is highest in bipolar,
Mm,
and people think depression, right?
hmm, hmm.
But the thing about depression is, if you're the difference between depression and bipolar is to be clinically depressed, you cannot ever have had a bout of mania. Otherwise, you're diagnosed on the other side. So if you're in a deep depression and say you have major depression in even the most severe case, you don't even get out of bed.
Mm.
You're not going to walk to the gun cabinet, unlock it, put the bullets in, and do the thing that kind of takes a highly motivated state to do. But if you're in a deep depression all the time and then you hit a manic state, you're motivated to do anything. And if you remember what you felt like in that depressed state while you're in that manic state,
Yeah.
and
So going from sticking on that for a moment, because I do think this is important, especially if anyone sees signs of this in themselves or anyone they know, is there is a literal call for help. He calls his brother. He Carrie calls Kevin at like 3 a.m. and is, help me. I'm gonna do something. Is he in a depressed state, or is he coming down from a manic state, do you think? And that's where he realizes, I'm gonna do something and I don't want to, but I'm gonna do it.
I think he was in a manic state because they showed him shaking and not being able to sleep. And yeah, he was crying, he was
Hmm.
sad, but again, sadness and depression are two different things. You can be sad in that manic state, remembering how depressed you were.
Yeah.
And so you still know you were in that not hedonic nothing matters anhedonic. So yeah, so you know you were in that nothing in the world matter. He just won the title.
Well,
But
and he had won the title a little bit before, and then you fast forward some number of months, and all of a sudden he finds out the triggering moment is that he just found out that the WWF wasn't going to renew his contract.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so he's I'm done. I don't have a life anymore. And again, back to your point of what grounds Kevin is that he has Pam, he has that family, and by this point he has had another son, so he's got, a wife
He
and
has
two
meaning.
kids. He has that mean
And
he's
Carrie's
also,
only meaning was in the ring.
and
Yeah.
his father had turned the family business over to him, so he's running the promotion, he's got the family, he's not in the ring anymore, he's not doing that to his body and to his mind, he's got this other stuff. And the first thing Kevin asked is, well, where's this girl that he brought, with him to Christmas? And he's like, who? And it's like, it was just some floozy that I picked up, you know, is that
He's like, I
wasn't
don't
a
even know her
thing.
name.
Yeah, I don't even remember her name. Yeah. It's a literal call for help. but he doesn't tell him where he is.
Yeah, and
So
unfortunately, this is the late 80s where you couldn't just share location and
exactly.
you know,
And so the first thing he
stay on the
does,
phone with him while you're on your way.
and this is where the ultimate failure of, after all the failures, the ultimate failure to me of Fritz von Erich is immediately after Carrie calls up, Kevin calls his dad and say, "Hey, have you seen Carrie?" No. Why? He's in a bad place. I'm afraid he might do something to himself. I'm afraid he might hurt himself. Well, you fix it. He called you. You take care of it. And he hangs up on him. Like, hold on a second, Pop. That's not a dad move at all. It's okay. Let's make a plan. Let's figure it out. All right. Let's do something. He does nothing. He just
Mhm.
goes on with his life. He goes on and does his thing and he didn't call me, he called you, you figure it out. And it leads to incredible tragedy, and
Well,
an
yeah, go ahead.
avoidable tragedy had had everyone been in the right headspace that they should have been, had they recognized, hey, we need to work a little more on this and stop pushing so hard on that.
Hmm.
And I think the what pulls Kevin through it is the fact that, you know what, I'm not, because he goes after his dad because of it. I called you. I told you. Why didn't you help? Because you're a freaking dad. That's what you're supposed to do. And then ultimately, he just kind of washes his hands of it and says, "I'm not you.
Yeah.
I'm moving on."
So we take the genetic variables, but then we also add a culture to it. And this
Yeah,
was a family culture, and might be common in that circuit, in what is just what would drive you to be a wrestler culture.
yeah,
We saw that in that Unreal documentary or whatever. There is some of this that culture, but let's go back to ancient cultures. Look at something like the Vikings, right? We get very good portrayals of that in the show Vikings in Last Kingdom, and you know the culture is I have these kids and I am training the sons to be warriors. Well, what happens if you're a warrior? You go to war. And a lot of times, this is where they lose sight is they don't come back.
hmm,
And so we're driven to for our genes to go further, and they have to go further in the culture we live in. Which if your son becomes an artisan and you're the greatest warrior in the village, you become shamed by everybody there. So your kids become warriors because they're your progeny, and probably they have the genes for it. Because if you're alive long enough to have kids in that
hmm.
culture, then you probably had good genes for fighting, right?
80-20. And we've thrown up, we have mentioned that number a few times.
Yeah. So this pressure, this cultural pressure for your sons to be warriors, leads to the fact that they may not end up passing your genes along because they might most likely will die, even if they're really good. And so it's culture and our nature are always fighting each other. We touched on it earlier with the middle-aged white woman that's unhappy with her life because culture and nature are fighting each other. And that's where balance comes in. And we can look back and say, oh, well, that was not great on those Viking parents' side, but you didn't live in that culture.
Hmm.
That wasn't great on dad's side in the Von Erich story, but there was a culture involved there.
Yeah.
There was a pressure for him to make sure his kids were on the top of the chain.
I haven't brought this up in a while, but again, I recommend everyone read Sebastian Hafner's Defying Hitler, which is his memoir of coming of age, growing up in the 30s and seeing how that happened and writing about how it happened and kind of his epiphany, his breaking moment was when he's at work as what is essentially a paralegal or law clerk, equivalent today, and some brown shirt comes barging in demanding to know if there are any Jews working here. And he he says basically, I kept my head down and I kept working and I felt so much shame. that is when he knew he didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he had to do something because he felt so much shame and he couldn't do that anymore. But if you want to know how, as I've said before, in the early 1900s, the place to be for science, culture, art, media, all of it was Germany, especially Berlin. And within a generation, that same nation starts two world wars and leads to the greatest slaughter in human history, probably it, by a percentage of the amount of people that we think died. So many people died in World War II. We don't know how many people died. Why? Because they kept their head down and they kept working. That's why. And the social pressure was keep your head down and keep working. And so you can say all you want. Well, I would have. No, you wouldn't have. History shows you take that, you take, as I brought up before, the abolition movement here in the States, or later the civil rights movement, and how long it took to reach a critical mass for those things. Is no, history says that most of us most of the time are going to keep our head down and keep working. And if you don't recognize that as a fact of human nature, then when the time does come, you won't be able to recognize if you're doing it and why you're doing it. I mean, that's why we talk about these things. And that's why we talk about these stories that show the people who break from these kinds of cycles.
Hmm. Which I guess was the main theme of the of the movie because I mean, especially with that ending scene, which I guess I won't spoil.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
mm, let me see where I'm going to go with this. Okay, so I'm just going to say this out loud. They changed the bar on the bottom of Zoom, and I don't know how to pause this. Hold on. Give me a sec. I might have to clip this out. Record. I don't want to hit that button because it might just completely stop it. There used to be just a little pause button up in the left corner. I'm going to hit this button. I might have to clip two things together. Oh, it comes up. Okay, the next thing I kind of wanted to go into briefly was the 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 scenes on crying. Because if you haven't gathered from our conversation here, three of the four brothers die in different parts of the thing. And when the first one does, Dad comes out, and of course everybody's wearing sunglasses, and he pulls the sunglasses off of them. Says, "No, you're going to show your eyes, and I don't want to see a tear." And even Mom is like, "We don't cry, we don't cry," and that kind of bothered me
Mm-hmm.
because uh, there's a difference between whining and crying. And whining, if you cry and blubber about everything, that is weakness. I'm sorry, that is weakness. But if you can't shed a tear when your brother died, that is a different kind of weakness. That is running from pain.
Mm.
That is not embracing pain. That is running from pain. Yes, you, as Peterson says, you want to be the strongest man at your dad's funeral, or right? That's his saying there. But you can be strong. You can give your speech. You can support people with a tear in your eye. In fact, you come off as just callous
Yeah.
otherwise. So yeah, that bothered me, and that is toxic masculinity.
It,
And when you suppress those feelings like that, that leads to a rebounding effect on the other end, as we saw with Carrie and then later Mike. Of course, Mike's situation was special because there was
yeah,
a
there's
li-
brain damage there, literal brain
yeah,
damage.
literal
Yeah.
brain damage, and so his situation was he was the only one where I'd say maybe he had a curse. You know, that was the one because David died because of his intestines basically exploded, but that was probably because of all the drugs.
The drugs plus the exertion. Yeah.
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 And Carrie killed himself, but Mike killed himself too, but it was after he had an accident that basically gave him brain damage and he could no longer play his guitar.
Hmm.
Because that was the scene where he's in
Yeah,
there.
that was the scene where he finally broke. Yeah.
Hmm. So that is where I think that was the most toxically masculine
Hmm.
point because pushing your kids to be their best, yeah, that is, but again, we got to balance culture with that. And realistically, we idealize these people. One of the examples Williamson brings up is everybody wants to be Tiger Woods, but they don't want to go through what he went through to get there. And everybody who's the top of anything went through what those kids were going through, at least some version of it, right? All your Olympic athletes that we just got done celebrating went through some version of that. Jerry Rice talks famously about how he would exert himself to be the best person out there. You know, Muhammad Ali, I didn't even start counting till it hurt. Right? We celebrate these people. We celebrate it. We encourage it. Positive reinforcement, right? And so as Texas Tornado fans, we were encouraging his dad's behavior.
Yeah.
We were reinforcing that behavior. But then when you come to a tragic event, again, one of your brothers died, and not only just one of your brothers, y'all were close. It wasn't
Very
like
close. Yeah.
it wasn't like you were estranged brothers or you just really didn't get along or I would still cry even if it was an estranged brother that I hadn't seen in 20 years. You know, now you're close. They were peas in a pod. They were
Yeah.
tag team brothers. They would do everything together, even at home. They still lived together, except for Kevin had moved out, I think. They all still lived in the same house.
Yeah.
You can't shed a tear for that. That is a different kind of cowardice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also you brought up, nature earlier, and one of the reasons so many people are unhappy is because we live in ways that are so contrary to our nature. Is I was at a wedding Saturday, and I didn't know most of the people there, but I knew the bride and the groom. They're work friends of my wife, and so I've known them for several years. And when the father of the bride got up, never met him, don't know him or his family, I just know his daughter. But when he's giving his little speech and his toast, and he starts to get a little choked up, and I start to get a little choked up, I get a little lump in my throat. That's natural for not only for a normal person, but for someone who has a daughter not that much younger than the bride. Yeah, you're going to feel that, right? You should feel that. Um, I brought up my honorable mention, Ford versus Ferrari, and Henry Ford III is just blubbering in the car. Why? I wish my dad was alive to see this.
Hmm. Well, and
Yeah,
tears
that's
aren't always
natural.
about sadness either.
Yeah,
Have
he
you ever
was.
cried when something just went so well you couldn't believe it? Cry
You
at your
you
wedding, right?
you
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 cry
you
at
brought
your
up you brought up the Olympics too. How many times do you see someone win the gold, and while they're celebrating, there's tears streaming down their face because
Yeah,
they
I
are
was talking
so
about
moved.
being hard on yourself and people being hard on you. All of that culminates in that one moment.
Hmm.
All that abuse, all of that effort, all of that pain, all of that suffering, all of that sacrifice culminates in that one moment. If that doesn't hit you hard, I'm starting to wonder if you're going to be an axe murderer someday.
and
It's
and then it's all nicely wrapped up with the last scene of the movie is Kevin sitting there on the grass watching his boys play, throw the football around together, and he is just unashamedly crying. And to your point, I think that's equal measure happy tears and sad tears,
mhm.
because he's watching his boys. He's got a bit of a half smile on his face because he's watching his boys. But also when they come up to him and say, "Dad, what's wrong?" It's, I used to be a brother too, and I miss my brothers. You can have both. You can be sad and happy at the same time, especially in a moment like that. And to your point, if you're choking that down, you're running away from it. That's not strength. That's cowardice. That's you're not facing it. And it is hard, especially as a man, to face these things sometimes, especially as we've talked before. I've mentioned this, but it's been a while. One of the hardest things as a husband and a father I've ever had to go through is when we had to put our dog down
Mm-hmm.
because there's
Oh.
absolutely nothing you can do. There's just absolutely nothing you can do. And that helplessness of knowing that your wife and children are hurting and that you can't fix it sucks.
Shoot, I was hurting when I holding Wallace there and they were putting the
Yeah,
stuff in him and he looked at me like, "Thank you." I was like, the, I couldn't. I was crying. She was crying. The techs were crying. The dog was crying. It was,
yeah, yeah. It is not fun, but it is a fact of life and you can't run away from it. And if you do, it's not going to be healthy and it's not going to lead to a good place.
hmm. Well, and we talk about emotions and how a lot of them come from the same place. That's a very strong emotion. And eventually that's going to come out in some way. And us men, a lot of times these emotions that you suppress come out as aggression
Mm,
because that's our go-to in crisis. If the lion jumps out of if I'm there with my family and the lion jumps out of the weeds, my job is to fight the lion so they can get away, not to start running and leave my family behind, right?
yeah.
Now, if it's me and you, I just got to run faster than you. But
So long, buddy. Been nice knowing you. I'll say something nice at your funeral.
be like, he was slow, but he was a nice guy. He was
Yeah.
so nice to lend his succulent meat to the cause.
My back and my knees hurt. Yeah, I ain't running fast. You're gonna outrun me on that one.
Yeah, you used to be faster than me, but now I'm a sprint coach, and I'm
And
not a
my everything
thoroughbred, but I'm
hurts.
a lot faster than I used to be.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I wanted to wrap things up here with this video that I've been seeing recommended to me, and I finally clicked on it and watched it, and it was worth the click. This is some girl, young woman I've never heard of before, and I hadn't seen until this video started popping up. But I'm gonna check out some of her other stuff after watching this one because it's really good. Um, and it's like I've said about Hillary Lane's channel, Second Story, it's good to have this feminine perspective. And because she's talking about a lot of the things you are talking about and ranting about, as I mentioned earlier, the you know, affluent suburban housewife who just says, "Well, I'm just not happy anymore." Why? Well, one of the reasons is uh as let's see, I forgot her name already. Marina McBain. Um, and she goes through a number of big successful romance movies and then the Office TV show and goes through how, wait a minute, it suddenly dawned on her all of these romance movies are celebrating cheating. And so basically she gives the feminine breakdown of who is the comedian that I'd sent the clip to you and said,
Yeah,
and you said, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before," and you got
the
to watch the
Notebook.
whole
Yeah,
thing
the Notebook,
about
and
how he sat down with a girl of this is the most romantic movie, and he watches it and goes, "Are you kidding me?" And basically his point was flip the genders and tell me that's still romantic. And in fact, she does that at the end with a different movie where the guy is the one who cheats. And I think he's just not that into you. The guy is the one who cheats. It wrecks his family, and his wife divorces him. And yet you flip it around in all these other examples, and it's the woman who's cheating, and it's, oh, well, and she goes through all the different reasons. It's destiny, it's meant to be. And the key point in all of these examples she gives is that the worst you can say about any of the guys is they're not a great boyfriend or they're not a great husband,
they spend too much time at work. That's the
but
Hallmark movie.
they're still
Yeah.
good. It's still a it's still a good relationship. It's just not the one they want.
Hmm.
And the why is also important is because I think she pinpoints it with the reason, two reasons. The reasons writers are doing this is one, because they're lazy, because this gives them a very quick and easy way at emotional manipulation by writing a story like this. But the other reason that I think that, again, this is why the feminine perspective is so important, is because from the feminine perspective, what she's focusing on is being chosen. Here is someone who will do anything. Like, my gosh, I'd forgotten about this scene because I've heard people talk about The Notebook. I've never watched it. In one of the scenes of The Notebook, when Ryan Gosling's character is trying to get the girl's attention, he climbs a Ferris wheel as it's in motion because she's on a date with someone else and says, "I'm going to let go if you don't agree to go out on a date with me." Where are the cops? Go get a restraining order, honey. In real life, you get a restraining order. And yet, oh, he's willing to put his life on the line, which actually is a healthy feminine motivation of, oh, he is so into me. He's literally willing to put his life on it. He's willing to, as you said, he's going to step in front of me and my children when the lion jumps out of the bush, right? That is what they are manipulating with these kinds of stories. And yet they're doing it at the expense of actual healthy relationships. Because in almost all of these stories, the romance, the cheating relationship is fairly toxic. It is not a healthy romance. And yet this is what women are being conditioned to want. And this is why I brought up, good thing Pam wasn't too modern. Yeah, it's good she wasn't too strictly traditional like Doris, so that she became toxic in a different way of, well, whatever my husband says must be right. No, 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 it's not always right. You need to push back a little bit. Even if you ultimately end up agreeing with him, he still needs some pushback. On the other hand, you don't want to go in the other direction and say, I'm out of here. My needs aren't being met. You're toxic. Instagram told me this on a meme, and now I'm leaving and taking the kids with me. So this is why it matters. And go ahead and bring up this clip, because in her conclusion, she talks about a little bit about the psychology of this and why we have been ranting about good stories versus crappy stories.
Well, I'm going to go into that, but I want to comment on the Ferris wheel real
Okay.
quick. That kind of behavior should be a red flag. Oh, he wants me this much. That's also super impulsive. That is the behavior of someone on the male spectrum of the dark triad, where they have no impulse control. She was there on a date with another person. He climbs a Ferris wheel to demand to basically hide to hold her hostage on a
Mm-hmm.
decision.
Mm-hmm.
Someone will die if you don't make this decision. That is manipulative behavior. That is impulsive. That is a lack of regard for well-being. All of these, there's a difference between fighting the lion so they can get away and going and finding a lion to fight it. Those are two different things. And the fact that he put her on the spot where someone dies or she says yes while she's there with somebody else, that is dark triad behavior. That's all three. That might be the
Mm-hmm.
culmination of the three. It was manipulative Machiavellian. It's all about me narcissism, and it was impulsive psychopathic, antisocial. It was all three at once. So yes, restraining order right then and there.
Yeah.
Or just say no and see what he does.
You're really gonna let go? Yeah.
And if he's that crazy to let go, Darwin Award.
Well, you dodged a bullet there, honey.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go into this. Sorry to sidetrack us there. Okay. Cultivation theory. I think I paused it before she said it, but if she doesn't say it, if you and you're just listening, it says real big on the screen, cultivation theory.
Old cultivation theory, and it suggests that the more you're exposed to the same type of storytelling, the more it shapes what feels normal to you. So when you grow up watching film after film where true love is treated as a free pass to cheat on your perfectly fine partner, you absorb that. And I know that sounds a bit dramatic, okay? No one watches The Notebook once and immediately thinks, okay, cheating is fine now. No, it is way more subtle than that. It's that you watch The Notebook, and then you watch The Office, and then Love Actually, and then People We Meet on Vacation, and slowly your brain starts building this picture of what love is supposed to look like. If your relationship is peaceful, it must be lacking. If it's intense and chaotic, it must be right. Because these movies don't just romanticize cheating, they tell us that if he doesn't dangle off a Ferris wheel for you, then it's not true love. And that is where it becomes a problem. Because real love is also loyalty. Real love is also honesty. Real love is also a boring Tuesday where nothing happens and you still choose that person. But Hollywood isn't interested in that Tuesday love because it doesn't make for a good movie. At the end of the day, the problem isn't that movies show cheating, the problem is that it asks you to call it romance. Because these stories aren't just showing us what love looks like, they're showing us what love excuses. And I'm sorry, but I'm done letting a slow motion kiss in the rain convince me that someone's partner is just background noise. And if you're gonna
All
build
right.
a love story
That's
on betrayal, then show us the cost, actually let us see the consequences. Because if you're
it, all of those are great points. It's worth your watch. If you've got it's just under 30 minutes, so I think that's a good length with the amount of detail she goes into. But that's why we have been ranting about stories. Is you know if you've heard the term the Overton window, that's another term for kind of a similar idea of you're shifting what is acceptable. And yeah, it's I the dual point there is what was so important to me to make is that the one on the one hand, you're showing that this is what true love is of like I said, setting this up, things that in a lot of ways are not good relationships, not stable or downright toxic. And on the other hand, because in all of these stories, they're in a solid relationship. Maybe it's just not spicy anymore. Okay, well then talk to your partner like an adult and figure out how to spice things up. Okay? As to use her words, the boring Tuesday, right? It's like that can be very comforting. That can be very good. That is part of growing together, right? But now you're being conditioned that, oh, that's a problem. Now, to be fair, it can become a problem if you let familiarity become passivity. Okay, well, yeah, that can be a problem. If you let, that, I just need that closeness, that connection, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, we haven't had sex in a month. Okay, that's a problem. Okay. Yes, the solid relationship can become boring if you let it, but it can also be revived if you want it to.
Hmm.
And rather than, as she said, rather than showing us those stories, because that would take actual work, we're going to use manipulation techniques and show you Ryan Gosling in the rain so that you forget all the other stuff that's going on here, and we aren't going to think about or care about the consequences of this kind of behavior in real life, which are not good. uh what's divorce lawyer's guy's name? I just
James Sexton.
Sexton. Yeah. As James Sexton talks about this, and he talks about how when we were listening to him the last time I was down there, he talked about this in detail of basically uh guys cheat because there's someone hot and they're horny. Women cheat because they have a plan. For women, there needs to be a connection, there needs to be time, and then they make a plan. Okay? That's what she's that's what she's basically railing against is all of these movies are showing that and saying that's romantic. No, because ladies, you talk all the time about how loyalty is important. You talk all the time about how honesty is important because we men need to open up to you. Okay. But then you're watching this garbage that is telling you that's not good enough and that's not true love and that's not what romance is. So which is it?
What's the what's her name that always does this stuff with not Martha Stewart, Martha Stewart with Snoop
Mar-
Dogg?
yeah.
Have you ever
Yeah.
heard her explain the difference between her affair and her husband's affair?
No.
So if I can find a short clip here, we might play that. How long is this clip? Oh, it's only 2 minutes. Okay, cool. Let me click on that. Pause it. Oh, get past the ad. Okay, so this to set this up, she was doing an interview, and what news organization is this? E News. Credit to E News because this interviewer, she's talking about the messy divorce and how the affair her husband had was made it all worse and da 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 da. Credit the interviewer. He said, "Didn't you have an affair at one time?" So let's bring this up. It's only 2 minutes, so not derailing us too long.
Fair early on. Yeah, but I don't think Andy ever knew about that.
Martha Stewart admits to cheating on her husband in her new Netflix documentary. In the trailer for Martha, the
It's just
lifestyle
an
mogul
advertisement.
says she was unfaithful to her ex-husband, Andy Stewart. She makes the confession while giving her thoughts on whether to stay in a relationship that isn't working.
Young women, listen to my advice. If you're married and your husband starts...
Okay, so that wasn't the video wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but maybe I'll cue it up for next time. Wait, hold
I
on.
mean, that was enough right there of, well, yeah, but I don't think my husband ever knew
Oh,
about it.
no, she starts talking about it right now. Hold on. Let me bring it back up.
That's, yeah, sure, that makes it all better.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, but I don't think Andy ever knew about that.
The pair were married for nearly
Oh, it's
3
still just a
decades
story.
after tying the knot.
Well, I fumbled that one, but it was a last minute. A last minute.
So I did a,
But she basically says, well, I mean, it was really quick, and he never knew about it, and da, 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 and all these little things to justify it when his was the horrible one, which he shouldn't have done that. But also, you can't justify yours as well. But that is the logic that we have in this day and age. Listen to Laura Howe. You brought me on her. I still don't like her delivery, but she does have a lot of good things to say, so I still listen.
her shorts and her clips are very good because you're right, her delivery isn't great, but if you can get just that nugget, if you can get right to the core of what she's talking about,
But
she
but
makes
it's
good
the
points.
modern idea of if he cheats, he's a horrible person. If she
Hmm.
cheats, it's because of something he did,
Hmm.
which is
I
the
just
which is the
happened to see a clip of hers when I was watching through, kind of catching up. I haven't watched my YouTube channels that I follow in a while, and I was going through and I saw a clip of hers, and she was making this point of, well, wait a minute, ladies, you say you want all these things from a man about, you need to be more emotionally available and I need your time and blah 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 blah. But then if he asks you for what he wants, which is sex, well, now that's just demanding. That's just gross. That's just, why are you like this? Be an adult. But no, he needs that to feel that connection with you in the same way that you need the things you're asking for to feel the connection. So why is one side asking for what they need okay, and the other side asking for what they need? Well, that's just beyond the pale.
well, on this topic though, specific to this topic, we've beat that dead horse and we can beat it again later.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about on the slow cultural uh, normalization of that behavior.
Mhm.
One thing, so she used the word comfort in that video you wanted me to share. She used the word comfort, and that's what we want as men. And I'm going to exclude all sadists and abusive examples here, but the core of male jealousy is mate guarding. And I do not know who to attribute this quote to, but it's brilliant. We try to control those things we cannot trust.
Mm.
And I guarantee you, even if you're thinking of that kind of behavior, and actually most, especially in the dating world now, because I have so many people I know in the dating world. The average female behavior is you need to change, but I'm going to keep doing all those things I was doing before we started dating. And, I'm still going to go out with the girls. I'm going to do this. We've talked about girls' night out and stuff. And if you are even thinking of doing something like that, you're going to start doing things like putting your phone upside down. You're going to start doing things that like elicit a lack of trust. Trust is earned, and it is hard to earn and easily lost.
Hmm.
And I guarantee you, if you break the trust of your man and he is passionate about you still, you will get jealousy patterns of mate guarding. And that's going to be surrounding trust issues. And he will try to control you because you control what you cannot trust. And if you got skin in the game, like you were actually engaged or you've been together for just many years or you're married or you have kids together, you might double down on that. No excuse for any kind of abuse, but still you can be like asking questions, being just that behavior is going to come out. Either that's going to happen or they're going to check out. One of the
Yeah.
two. And checkout is a self-fulfilling prophecy because now you're like, oh, my husband doesn't even pay attention to me anymore. Now this guy that comes along pays attention to me. Ah, now I'm in a Hallmark movie again. And so, yeah, I mean, these things snowball.
Hmm.
And as Laura House says a lot is a lot of times the male side of it is reactionary. And she speaks mostly on the sex part of it, where they say, oh, his behavior, because he doesn't do all those little things, that's why it went away. But she said, no, actually, typically, the lack of sex precedes marital satisfaction, lack of marital satisfaction. So it's the same thing goes with lack of trust. You're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're either going to say he's so controlling or he's checked out.
Hmm.
One of the two. And as males, you have to be aware of that too, because you got to check yourself too a little bit. Is this the behavior I think it is, or is it not? Do I need to, you can go set boundaries. Do I need to set boundaries? Hey, I kind of would like to know where you're going on these nights you just go out. That kind of stuff. That's not controlling. That's concern. Now, part of
Yeah.
the selfish concern, but it's also just concern in general. So yeah, there are better ways to do this, and we've got to close this up because I got to get back to work. But
Yeah. In conclusion, consume better stories
well, the
because
thing is,
it
they make
it
good
matters.
stories.
And
They're
they
just
are
not
out
good
there.
examples.
Okay, well that's a good point. And
Like the Ed Gein show was a great story,
well
but we don't want to be Ed Gein.
back to that clip and that video is like I said, she wraps it up with a movie that because it's the guy who cheats does show behavior you don't want to pattern, but it is a good story in that it shows you the results of that bad behavior.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know enough about the movie to know if it shows what leads up to that and how you get to that point in the first place, but if it at least shows the consequences of bad actions, then yeah, that's a good thing. It's like I said, I think I mentioned this. I said to my mom the last time I was there, I guess Christmas, and we're of course I'm sitting there with the grandbabies watching Avatar: The Last Airbender because they love it and they love to watch it with me. And my mom rolls her eyes and oh, we're watching this again. And I said, yeah, because I can't find anything else that's good. And by I mean good in the grand sense of the word. And it dawned on me in explaining to my mom why I find this good and why I find this a healthy story for young people to watch is every character has to go through an arc. Every character has flaws and has to learn lessons. And there's only a couple of main characters that never learn a lesson, and they're the bad guys. And it just kind of dawned on me, that's why they're the bad guys, because they have all of these off ramps along the way and they won't take them. They refuse to take them. They refuse to learn their lesson. They refuse to have any empathy for their fellow man. And that's what makes them the bad guy. That is a good thing to teach young people and teach them in a way that's not a lecture. Teach them in a way that's fun.
Hmm.
That's why stories matter.
All right, we'll end it there. If you've made it this far, you probably already subscribed, but tell somebody about us. And we'll keep doing this again once a week at this point. I got the other one out a little late, so it might be close together with this one. Uh, we'll figure out what we're going to leave in the comments if you got a topic that we can cover. We haven't done a fitness episode in a while. Uh, there's plenty going on in the world, but we've kind of strayed away from that just because it's
Yeah.
also annoying and everything's ever changing with it. And if you report on something today, it might be different 2 days from now by the time it's even posted. So yeah, we'll kind of keep an eye on that. And if something jumps out at us, we'll jump in on it. But yeah, this was a fun one. Anything else? Final thoughts?
Nope. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, later, everyone.